we've been watching live action Avatar: The Last Airbender, and like going from something like Bocchi the Rock to that, it's just like everything at Bocchi the Rock feels so like intentional.
Hello and welcome to Add It to the List, the show where we binge watch a season of an anime and then talk about whether or not we think it should go on your watch list. My name is Jack, and with me as always is Forrest.
Hello there.
And this week, beware spoilers for the first, and as far as I know, only season of Bocchi The Rock. So Forrest, what did you know about Bocchi The Rock going into it?
Like literally nothing. I mean, I guess besides the fact that the main character had pink hair and I knew it was about a rock band, but I went into this pretty much 100% blind. And bro, I love this show so much. I have watched it twice now, and I think it's so good, but we'll get into that. Anyway, Jack, did you know anything about Bocchi the Rock?
Nope. Never heard of it. It was one of those many releases that just sort of got lost for me. Like, I've started watching a seasonal show called Beach's Anime Roundup, where he just goes through the Crunchyroll releases and then talk about whether or not he's seen it, and if he did, what his thoughts were.
That's funny. He's
super into Slow Burn Yuri, which is, I mean, live your truth guy. I actually really like that entire anyway. And watching those has really made me appreciate that there's a lot of media that gets made.
Oh, yeah.
Like, holy God, there's a lot of shows at any given time that's new and coming out. And this show just sort of didn't stick around enough, I guess, for me to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one for me because I had definitely heard about it, and I had heard or seen rumors on like Twitter and stuff about it like being really good. So I had like thrown it on my like to watch list back when it came out, but it was just, I mean, sometimes there's just shows that, you just never get around to watching, and it was one of those. And like, I just had a hard anime kick not that long ago, way harder than usual, and it was just one of the ones that I decided to watch, and I'm just like so glad that I watched it, because as a musician, this series just like really hit home for me, like way more than like anything I've ever watched, honestly. It is very lighthearted, and it is a comedy. Like, the fascinating part about this show in particular is that it's based on what's called a 4-coma, which is basically just a 4-panel like comic strip, like basically something you would see in like American newspapers. So it was a very, like, everything was just punchlines. You had these characters, they were in a band. I haven't read it yet. I'm definitely going to. But, like, I don't know if there is, like, as much of a... I'm assuming there is kind of a through line, as there is in this first season. But, it's interesting thinking about how it's translated from basically what is supposed to be, like, a comedy manga to this show, which I genuinely think has like really well written characters and a really, I mean, like, simple but really nice story. I have lots of thoughts, as you can tell.
That's fair. Well, I think you kind of touched on something that is underappreciated, and it's the stakes don't have to be high for us to care, right?
Yeah.
Because what's at stake here is one girl's desire to have friends, basically. There is no mystical elements. There is no fantastical anything. Like, this is just the story of a socially anxious girl who learned guitar to impress people and make friends, but she spent so much time learning guitar that she forgot to go out and impress people and make friends.
Yeah.
And that's enough for us to care about it, because we care about her, because she is so approachable. And like, a lot of times anime has a very bland protagonist so that you can project, so that it doesn't have and not just anime, but media, so that it doesn't have to do the heavy lifting of making a character that is sympathizable. Bocchi has so much character, and she's still so sympathizable, right? Like,
I'm just over here like shaking my head up and down.
like my little bean of a daughter is just
and that's like the thing that really struck me like right off the bat is that like, I mean, it is just a slice of life anime, but like I think Bocchi's characterization is a very like, I don't know if I want to say like realistic, but it's a very interesting interpretation of, you know, social anxiety. I don't really have any authority to talk about social anxiety because I know that is like actually something you can be diagnosed with. But like Bocchi as a character, I find incredibly relatable because, you know, I've never been diagnosed for social anxiety, but like I still get incredibly anxious. And like Bocchi, I have a tendency, you know, to like overthink things. And like, granted, throughout the entire show, that is used as a comedy bit, which I do think is used very well. But like, her overthinking is usually the thing that is leading to her social anxiety, because that is genuinely a thing that happens.
Yeah.
You know,
you get in your own way because you're catastrophizing.
Yeah. And like, I think it does a really good job of using that as the comedy whilst also not feeling like, you know, in poor taste, I guess, because it is relatable. And like, you know, life is humorous, and like, while social anxiety is a real thing, it's not, it's really just representing a character that, you know, has these reactions.
Yeah, right? Like, it isn't she has social anxiety, laugh at her. It's situations that are humorous for a person with social anxiety to have to try to navigate, right? Like, we're cheering for her throughout the entirety of it. And it's just that her internal monologue is hilarious. Right? Like, I always used to say that the reason why I didn't watch The Big Bang Theory is the joke isn't they're playing D&D and something funny happens to their characters. The joke is they're playing D&D, laugh at them. Right?
Yeah.
And that's not what's happening here.
And just Bocchi's relationship with music is one for me that is very... God damn it, I need to start that
You
over.
sympathize with somebody who posts videos to youtube.com?
Well, yeah.
/Bustelo?
Yeah, but my point was that Bocchi's like relationship with music and relationship with it as an art form is very relatable for me as well, because, you know, she's spent years of her life, granted she's only spent like 3 years of her life playing guitar at that point. Her personality, and like of no fault of her own, she fails to do what she wanted to do in middle school, which was like, make memories and stuff like that. And, I'm like literally too well aware of just like, that experience of like not being able to go out of your comfort zone, and approach people, even though, deep down you want to. I mean, like, that's the whole bit of like the first, like, I think that's the first episode where she like takes her guitar to school with her.
Yeah,
literally
first couple of episodes.
Literally just because she's like, I'm not going to talk to anyone, but I just hope that someone talks to me because I have my guitar with me. And ultimately that is the thing that leads to her like finally, being approached by someone who, is significantly more outgoing than she is. Who, I mean, is another character that I really like. Her name's Nijika. She's basically the person that asks Bocchi to join their band because their lead singer and guitarist just like ghosted them and just didn't show up for a concert, and so Bocchi is, just a prospective person, and because she's like the opposite of Bocchi, where she'll just run up to someone and be like, yeah, you want to like play music,
Yeah, it's a very real experience that I think all of us with social anxiety And I know that I'm a lot louder and brasher than how it tends to manifest and present itself, but it's all a coping mechanism, baby. I can't handle it, so I create a persona that I know you'll hate, so I have the certainty of knowing that what your reaction is going to be.
Yeah, my coping mechanism is just avoiding conflict at all costs, no matter what.
It's a lot easier, except for when it's not. But no, it's a very real experience that you will find as an introvert, is that how you make friends is because an extrovert decided that you will make friends with them. And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. And they definitely throw around the terms like introverted and extroverted, I feel like, on a fairly frequent basis. I'm not a psychiatrist. Like, introverted and extroverted, as far as I understand, aren't, it's not black and white. It's not like
no. Despite what people nowadays say that it is, it's not. Like, people have tendencies, people have leanings. It's very rare that you find somebody who is not either, or like is wholly one or the other, because that's just not how those terms work. It's a spectrum of behavior and it desires.
Yeah, and like, I'm not fluent in Japanese, so I don't really know like what terms they use in Japanese when, referring to what in translation was introvert and extrovert, because they might have a different connotation or a different term. Bocchi, she claims that she's introverted, and like, as with most people, I'm leaning that way too. Like, because I could just sit at home and fucking play video games and make music for a week and probably not see anyone. But I also do crave like social interaction occasionally, and that's like Bocchi is like the exact same way. She wants to hang out with people, and like, I love the whole bit about the summer and how like they just like, none of her bandmates asked her to hang out the entire summer, and then like, once they finally realized that none of them did, they were like, oh shit, we should probably have actually like tried to hang out with her. Meanwhile, Bocchi is just not doing anything, just waiting for someone to invite her out.
Yeah. And that's a big thing that she like that is a repeating thing that she herself like recognizes. It's not the best idea to put the iotus of interaction, to like put that on someone else, especially when they don't know that you're doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And like, she recognizes it, but and knowing something and being able to change yourself because you know that are two incredibly different things.
Well, and that's another positive, or this really well done part of Bocchi's character, is that like, she recognizes a lot of the things that are comedic bits. She is concerned with self-growth. Another comedy bit throughout is like, anytime someone's like, oh, what are your motivations? Like, why do you want to do this thing? She's just like, oh, I can't tell them that I'm just like super selfish and all I want is to be able to make money and not have to go to school and not work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it uses Bocchi's self-awareness, I think, to make her social anxiety feel even more real, because most people are aware of their anxieties, but that's the point of anxieties, is you can't control them.
Right. Just because it's irrational doesn't mean that it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's just a few of the things about this show that I think really made me love it so much. It's the first show in a long time. I mean, like, honestly, bro, I don't even know if there's another show that I've like felt this strongly about.
That's fair.
like right off the bat. And it is simple things, and relatability in art is important. Like, that is the thing that causes people to have interest in art. And I was just like so blown away at just like how relatable this show was for me. And I haven't even talked about its approach to like art.
Yeah. I mean, I think so far in this episode, you've spoken more than you do in a normal episode.
I know, dude.
Which is wild. I love that for you.
I mean, we haven't talked about the other two characters. There's Kita and Rio.
Rio!
Dude, I fucking love Rio. Rio is my absolute favorite
Rio's
character.
the bass player, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, she is... Like, I briefly, I've been talking about Bocchi this whole time, but like, every one of the four main characters in this show are incredibly nuanced people and characters because they feel like they have very real wants and goals and, you know, reactions to things. And they are like, there is a lot of nuance to like the ways in which they like react with each other, or like they interact with each other. Like a specific point that I absolutely loved was when Rio and Bocchi like meet up in a little cafe for just to like discuss lyrics, because like Bocchi was tasked with writing lyrics for their first song, and she was like, oh, I want to like show these to Rio because she's the one writing the music. I mean, like, I love every episode of this, made me laugh, like, and even on rewatch, like it literally all just made me laugh again, which I think is very impressive in and of its own right. Bocchi is just absolutely frantic about like trying to like figure out what she's gonna write. She's just like overthinking it, and like she's like, oh, I just need to write like a pop song that's like super relatable, and like, and then like when she brings it to Rio's just like, is this even what you wanted to write, bro? Essentially. And then like Bocchi's just like, I mean, I just feel like anything else I would write would just be too dark and gloomy. And then she's like, well, I don't give a fuck. Just write whatever you want. Because that's like another aspect of Rio's character that I think is just very important to the show's approach to art. Because art is one of those things that I think you should just let itself do whatever the fuck you want to do. Like, conforming and like attempting to conform is just like, there's a lot of importance to taking knowledge from, you know, other musicians and other art and all of that, but like the whole purpose is like how you approach that and like how you add your own twist to it. And like that's like basically Rio's whole character. Even though, you know, it is comedic and like that's the whole point, it's still a very like real thing.
It's one of those things where, you know, like, there is a difference between drawing inspiration from and trying to emulate. And I think that John Darnielle, the lead singer of the Mountain Goats, you know, there are a lot of interviews with him where he talks about how he doesn't listen to the type of music that he makes. Like, he is a metal guy. He is a goth like guy. He is a new wave guy. Like, he's not like, you know, a Mountain Goats guy, except he's the Mountain Goats guy. But he's taking those themes, or at least the themes that he gets from those music, the way that those musics make him think, and bringing it into this presentation where he is presenting something that's very much not metal.
See,
rock and roll.
I would love to hear him like try and write those styles of music, because like, while I do kind of agree that it is very important to not listen to just the type of music you make, I do think it is very important to also listen to that kind of music. I mean, just to have the full breadth, you know, and
yeah, you want to have a well-rounded experience.
Yeah, and like you need like emulating, like taking aspects of like your favorite production or like your favorite musicians, and, you know, like not just trying to copy them, but like make your own thing from that, and like thinking about why they do what they do is like a large part of my motivation in making music. And it's crazy how I feel like Rio's character is such a nuanced like representation of that, because like it's all like offhand remarks for the most part, you know. She like, there's moments where, you know, they're talking about music history, or like they go to an area with like a guitar shop, and like the immediate second that you ask Rio like, oh, like, what's the deal with this guitar shop, she will literally just jump in with like encyclopedic knowledge on like the history of the music in the area, and like, you know, shit like that. And like, that's a bit, but it's also a very like, it just like adds to the depth of Rio's character. Even Nijika at one point says that like Rio's dream is basically just to be able to make music from the heart, and like that was the reason she left her last band, was because they just wanted to do like what was popular, and that's just like not what she wants to do. And obviously in this day and age, you know, it's fucking impossible to make a living doing music unless you get like incredibly lucky. And so, like, I understand a desire to conform. Like, it's hard not to want to conform, because you know that something might be more popular. It might get more clicks. But, like...
And when you're faced between doing what you love and eating...
Exactly. And like they kind of play that for a bit the entire show because Rio is so focused on buying new instruments. And they even say that she's from a wealthy family. Like none of these characters are like poor or in dire straits because they're all fucking high schoolers.
Right.
But
there's not that element of lacking stability.
and
They
it
don't
is,
have to provide for themselves.
And it is interesting, because it is like they are fucking high schoolers. They are really young. And yet I think they're relatable because they represent what it means to be in high school very well, but I feel like they also represent like characters that are still growing and changing throughout the story, which is why it's so fascinating that this is like based on like a fucking comic strip, like essentially.
Right. It's either
because it's like
either the comic strip does a lot of characterization in not a lot of time, or they are the showrunners are projecting and it works.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it might be doing really, like, I feel like the characterization comes through the jokes, and like that's part of like what makes it so funny, is that like you are learning about these characters whilst things are happening around them. It's not like they're sitting there just telling you who they are. Like you get to like just see who they are.
They are showing, not telling. Right?
And that's like a hard thing to represent. It's like, compare this to like fucking just shonen. Like, I don't know, like Jujutsu Kaisen, for instance. Jujutsu Kaisen struggles with its characters, in my opinion, because everything is focused on, what's the next conflict that's going to happen? Like, what's the next fight that these guys are going to have to go at? It's not about you just getting to learn who these people are through their day-to-day lives. Right. And like, not that every shonen needs that, like Jujutsu Kaisen has its positives, but it's like, I think that you could have a shonen that does something similar to this. And I think there are like representations. Like, I think Mashal is a very good representation of a comedy shonen that like allows you to get to know these characters through jokes, similarly to Bocchi The Rock. All of the comedy is serving a purpose rather than just being there for the sake of being there.
Right. There's a difference between something throwing jokes in to a scene and something that is designed to be comedic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between this show and like, if you go back to literally any of our other episodes, I do nothing but bitch about comedy sequences. That's kind of my thing. And the reason why is because it's in shows that aren't designed to be comedic, and so it's distracting and detracting from the goal of the scene and the general, like, in the worst case, and unfortunately pretty often, it's detrimental to the characters because it's undoing progress.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening here. That's not this show. This show is inherently comedic, and that's like one of its focuses. And so as a result, the jokes are a lot more intentional and a lot more thought out, and the humor is situational, but it's because of the situation that the characters are in, right? Like, it's not forcing a joke in the bottom third of the panel as one of the characters who aren't on screen shouts something, right?
Yeah. Fuck yeah, like that's something One Piece has a problem with, bro.
I'm so glad you said it. I tried so hard not to name One Piece right there.
Yeah. And granted, there are parts of One Piece that I think are funny, but the parts of One Piece that I think are funny are when you're getting to experience the crew be themselves around each other and do silly shit. But not when they're in the fucking middle of combat or middle of like some...
And Usopp says something like that!
Yeah, and like his fucking eyes pop out of his face, like, it's just like, that stuff is fine, it's whatever. But anyway, Bocchi The Rock just does comedy to a T so fucking well, and it's like every episode feels like so strong. Like, there is a very... I think there is just a very strong through line for like every episode of the show.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question for you, Jack. How did you feel about fucking Nijika's sister, the manager. And
You don't ask this question. You know in your heart the answer.
I mean, I know, yeah.
Her and PA.
I know. I love that her name is just PA.
Yeah.
No, they are both absolutely fantastic. I love
Oh yeah, 100%. I also really like the older sister's character, in addition to the fact that she's just an alt girl and therefore brings out the golden retriever. Her.
When it's like
My buddy Fisher once called me a wife guy without a wife. Which I think means he was calling me a simp. The problem is he's right. Anyway. But one of the things that I like about the older sister is that she's actually a character as well, right? Like, she's not just there. She's sort of not an antagonistic force, but she is the reality, right? Like, she's the reality that these girls are being bounced against, is that this is a business. There are certain standards that you have to get to. And so she's kind of a nice way to bring in sort of that with the recognition of what we were saying earlier, that these characters are kind of removed from the real reality of the grind. If you don't get this many tickets, you don't eat, right?
Yeah.
Like the girls don't have to put up with that, and so they need something to keep them accountable, and that's the older sister. And it's not like she's being overbearing or being mean. She's just telling it how it is. She's running this place. She has to turn a profit.
She's she's just so, it's so, I mean, it's just as I was literally saying before, that you get to know her through her interactions with the other characters, like through her interactions with Bocchi and her sister. And I love how, like, Bocchi and her don't really have much of a relationship, but like every interaction that they have is just so perfect. Bocchi, in a lot of ways, is kind of the tying force for this band. Oh, speaking of which, that's actually, like, their band name, Kasoku Bando. Yeah. Did you, like, they briefly mention it.
It's zip tie.
How it's like zip tie. But yeah, like, I guess zip tie literally, like, the word Kasoku literally means to, like, bind or unite or something like that. But, like, because it's a zip tie, like, on packages with zip ties, it straight up says Kasoku Bando. Like, so it's just like a direct fucking
that's good,
like, pun in Japanese, which I think is really, really good.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
God, dude.
The only character that I don't like is Singer Girl.
Oh, Kita?
Yes.
Yeah,
and
I think
I think it's because she's the only one that doesn't, like, have a lot of depth to her perspective on music, because the music is a means for her to spend time with her crush, which is the bass player.
I do love that bit, though.
It's one of those things where, like, it got to me a little bit, but not enough to detract me from how much I was enjoying everything else. It's a little grating for me personally, but I just don't really like anime subplots.
Yeah.
However, or not anime,
romantic
subplots. I don't like anime subplots. Anime main plot or nothing. I just don't really like romantic subplots because that's just not something that I'm interested in. I think it's fine here. There are moments where I'm like, why is that girl in a maid outfit? Nobody else is. This place don't got a uniform. What's this about? But to that end, this show's actually a lot more respectful than I think a lot of shows depicting women of this age are.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another fascinating part about this show, is that all of the characters are women. Like, the only guy that is, like, an actual character is Bocchi's father, but even he doesn't have a fucking face. Like, you just never see his eyes. Every woman, or every character, is a fucking girl.
There are women and there are characters.
But, like, and it's funny, too, thinking about how, like, the only interactions with, like, other dudes are, like, as caricatures, because there's, like, the guys on the beach, and then there's, like, the two, like, there's, like, the biker gang guys in the school, which are both really funny moments. I literally think it is better that there aren't men, because these girls, like, actually get to be characters. Like, that's the whole point, is that, like, they themselves are characters.
You can tell when when a piece of media is written about women for ostensibly, like, the female market, but definitely by a man, you know? And you don't get that vibe with this show. Or at least I don't. It feels like a very earnest sort of, I don't want to say love letter, but like it feels like a very earnest sort of nod to this stage of life for these people. And I think it does it like pretty respectfully. Like there was a moment in episode 2 that I was just sitting there going, wow, I am going to hate this show because we don't see Bocchi, but we see that like she's drawing a bath. And I'm like, for fuck's sakes, dude. But then turns out she tosses ice cubes in it. She's fully clothed in her like PE swimsuit, and she's trying to give herself a cold so that she doesn't have to show up and be social the next day.
That shit's so good. Yeah, dude. I mean, I was just, you were talking about women, like stories written for women, but this is also written by a woman, which I think is very important.
I'm not surprised. I didn't say that because I didn't bother looking it up.
Yeah, I was just looking at it. But she does such a good job.
And that isn't to say that this show is inherently written for women, or maybe it is. Exactly. I don't know. I haven't looked into it at all. Like, this is a very approachable, very relatable show because it is an earnest depiction. It just so happens to be earnestly depicting women. And there are some moments that I think like sort of show an element of like of the female high school experience that you wouldn't necessarily get as a man. Like, for example, when they're taking the band pictures.
Yeah.
And they're all like, with the exception of Bocchi, they've all like sort of figured out how they take their selfies already. And it's like, yeah, I didn't fucking know what I was doing with that when I was 13.
I do love their first, like, profo, as they call it.
The profo.
Oh, Kita was something that I wanted to talk about because I feel like Kita as a character is, like, one of the weakest, you know, because she's a lot more one note. I do genuinely think that her bit with Rio is really funny because I feel like I love that Rio just doesn't really pay any mind to it. And it's not like creepy. It's just like she's a fucking high schooler and she's just like, and she's obsessed. I mean, like,
there are some lines where if a male character said that, I'd have gone, ooh.
Well, exactly. But she's not a male character. And I genuinely think that's part of why it works. And I mean, like, yeah, anyway, she as a character is kind of just there because they need a lead singer. And like, I think she plays her part fine, you know, like she's clearly not the focus, which I think is fine. And her interactions with the rest of them, I still think are pretty genuine and funny because she is like the only one out of them that like goes outdoors and like does shit. And so then when she's like, oh, we should climb all these stairs to go to the shrine, they're all just like, oh, please God, no. And then they all are just so out of shape that they just like can't fucking make it up the stairs. I like all of the people in this are just so nice. Like that's another interesting thing about this show is that like everyone is just a good person. And like I think that's plenty realistic. It's not a show that necessarily needs like insane conflict like that, you know. And it's like I like that all of the characters get along. There's no like weird superficial drama going on. Like they're all very supportive, you know. They're all like super supportive of each other, which is also rare to come by. And like I think that like Kita is a driving force too. Like, dude, the final fucking performance like at the cultural festival is just so good, dude. I mean, like that's another part about this that we just like haven't even talked at all about is like the visual part of this. This is a beautiful anime, and there is some like sequences of animation, very simple shit going on, like just them walking down the road and you just like see it and you're like, oh fuck, that's like so smooth, you know. It's
amazing to watch what a show does with its budget when it's not having to render explosions.
Oh yeah, dude. Like this is a little bit of an aside, but we've been watching live action Avatar: The Last Airbender, and like going from something like Bocchi the Rock to that, it's just like everything at Bocchi the Rock feels so like intentional, feels important to experience and witness. And then like I watched the first episode of the live action of Avatar, add in all of this bullshit, like they show the like fucking Genocide of the Airbenders. For whatever fucking reason.
I don't know if we had to watch that.
Exactly. But like, it was such a waste of money, bro. Like, they spend the first like 10 minutes on this bullshit that probably cost them as much as one fucking episode because of all of the visual effects and all of the like people involved. And I'm just like, it just was pointless and it was a waste of money. And it's like, what the fuck is the point of taking something animated and turning it into this shit that like is also basically just animated at that point because it's all fucking CGI. And
it's the quote unquote live action Lion King.
It's so
thing,
stupid.
Where like it's photorealistic CGI. It's animated.
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, that's a whole another fucking conversation. But Bocchi the Rock, like it feels so genuine and like purposeful. I was reading about the production of it not long after I first watched it, and like the studio actually like had the band perform the songs. And they filmed the band performing the songs, and then like all of the animated sequences where they're playing the songs is like animated over their movement, you know. So like I don't know, is that might be rotoscoping.
It was more or less mocapped.
Yeah, because like this is like the best guitar playing animation that I've fucking seen.
Yeah, it's clean.
Like they get all of, I mean, like obviously they get all of the hand shapes right because like they filmed people like playing the shit from like all of these different angles, because like all of the different like camera angles were, you know, based on footage that they took. It's just so refreshing to see stuff like that, you know.
This show also does a very subtle thing with their sound design. Again,
yeah, dude, the sound design's fantastic.
When you're dealing with like a realistic setting, you have room to explore how to make it good rather than how to emulate things, right? Like we're not creating monster screeches, we're figuring out what this sounds like from across the room whilst we're hiding in a box.
Yeah.
And it's just the subtle touches like that that really root you in the scene. Also, the soundtrack's a banger.
Yeah, no. All of the songs are really, really good. I especially love when they go to see Sick Hack live. I can't remember her name. Who's the drunk girl? We haven't even talked about her yet.
Remember her?
Yeah, how do you feel about her as a character? Because she's a very interesting take on like an adult musician, you know? Like her whole character is basically that like she was like Bocchi when she was in high school, and like she's always wanted to play music live, and then like when she's about to go on for her like first performance, she gets drunk, and like then I guess she just becomes an alcoholic after that. And like it's used as a comedy bit. I think that's probably the only comedy bit throughout this whole show that is like kind of in poor taste, you know?
Yeah.
Because it is representing a real, like, not that social anxiety isn't a real thing. It is a much less harmful disorder than alcoholism.
And like one leads to the other sometimes for some folks.
Yeah. And it's like she, as a character, I think is all right. I think she is probably one of the weaker parts, but she is also supposed to represent Bocchi, like a possible path for Bocchi, I think. Like she's supposed to be what, and obviously there's bits like throughout the show where Bocchi imagines her future. Usually really funny sequences where she's like, oh, and another representation of like the only time men show up is when like there's a dude at the bar, right, like the izakaya, that's just like talking about how he's working all the time, his home life sucks, he never gets to see his wife, he thinks she might be cheating on him, kind of bullshit. You know, like all of the men are representing archetypes, you know. And
which is a refreshing flip on that.
Yeah. And then she like overhears this and she's just like fantasizing about her just like becoming a fucking person that just shuts herself up in her room and just drinks all the time. And like that is represented in like one of her first interactions with, God, I like literally need to know her name because this is bugging me.
Well, while you look that up, what's also interesting is that like drug and alcohol use in the music industry in general, right? Like
Oh yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like especially like, you know, growing up when we grew up, Amy Winehouse. You think about the song Rehab, and then think about the passing of Amy Winehouse. It's like, well, this industry kind of thrives off of using and abusing people, and what's left for them to go to is what's going to kill them ultimately. And it's not because they want to do it, it's because of the pressures of the industry. And then, well, addiction is addiction, right? And
Yeah.
the ways that we normalize we normalize the fact that it is present rather than going, we need to change the industry so that it doesn't have to be present.
Yeah, I agree. Her name is Kikuri Hiroi. She is like just an interesting representation, to say the least. But one of her first interactions with Bocchi, you know, she's like talking about like, oh, like you should just try drinking before you go on stage. And then Bocchi's like, I'm like kind of underage. And she's like, oh, haha, funny, whatever. And then Bocchi's just like, oh God, am I going to end up like her? But that being said, their performance on the street is a really, really good moment in the show, I think. And there's a really dope bass solo from Hiroi. That moment's fantastic. And like,
Yeah.
it just, you get to see Bocchi's growth, because like we didn't even talk about how her first performance with Kasoku Bando is in a fucking mango box because she doesn't want to be seen. And then like it's about her slowly breaking out of this metaphysical or metaphorical shell. This metaphysical shell.
Wow.
Which she does on certain occasions when she's just like fucking dying. Like when she like was just like passed out for like their entire train ride to the beach. That was hilarious. Because she was just so fucking out of it. Yeah, dog. If it's not clear, I would add this to the list.
Fair enough. Well, fine, if you want to throw form out the window. But that's fair, right? Like, it's a good show. I propose that we have a subgenre for shows like this, and that one show where it's penguin girls in an outpost on the North Pole or some nonsense.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
There's like some show where it's like a bunch of girls in like Antarctica or something. It's like it sounds like it's a space thing, but I think like I don't actually know what it is. But shows that are just about a collection of good eggs that should be protected. I think we need to start calling these shows cartons. Because there are cartons of little eggs that we need to protect because they are so precious.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I literally, after I mentioned Sick Hack, I like was trying to figure out her name, but that performance I do really, really like. Like that whole sequence was really good. I love her two band members as well. I love how one of them's just like a fucking, I think she's Japanese, or was she actually European? Because she said she lived in Europe for like 18 years or some shit and like had just come back to Japan. I thought that was really funny. And she's got like kind of an accent in Japanese. Just so much like attention to detail. Yeah. And there's also the fantastic like shifts in style, essentially, where they're doing some comedic bit and like it either goes to like stop motion or like like there's that one really funny one where she's like counting out who her tickets are gonna be, and she's just like sister, dog, mother, father, sister, dog, mother, father, just like, oh, and it just turns into someone's real ass hand just fucking doing this shit over.
There's a lot of really good practical effect moments.
I also really love the whole like shift to like 80s anime when she's like fantasizing about how awful sports festivals are at school. And she's just like in a post-apocalypse just like getting burned at the stake because she didn't participate. I just, yeah, it's just really, really quality shit.
It's a good show. It's wholesome.
Yeah, I was gonna use that word.
Non-patronizing.
Oh, patronizing.
It's wholesome, parentheses, non-patronizing.
Okay. That's a good description. Yeah, I mean, the animation kind of does similar things to like what Trigger has done in the past with like shit like Panty and Stocking or like Kill la Kill. I do like that Rio was a huge fan of Sick Hack. Like she like already knew about them. Um and I also think it's really funny how Hiroi already knew Nijika's sister. And like whenever she comes around, Nijika's sister is just like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like I feel like I she's part of the reason why the alcoholism thing, it's not great, but it's also not terrible because like she's specifically there like, bro, I remember when you weren't like this, like what the fuck happened to you,
Right.
like trying to get her to stop, you know. Of course it is kind of in a comedic tone, but it's still like she's recognizing that there's a problem present, you know.
And I think the fact that they pointed out makes a lot of the jokes that they do tell like a lot better.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, it's not like they're going over the top with the jokes that they're making, right? Like they're not doing anything too terribly distasteful. But one of the things that I really like about that is it's again another element of surprising realism where like, yeah, if you're around the local scene long enough, you see success stories and you see washouts, right? And so they don't just disappear. Where did they go? And well, people know them, people remember them, right? Like that was a very subtle thing that I really enjoyed. It's just like if you live in one place for long enough and are involved in a certain sub community, you start seeing like old hat. And it's cool to see the old guard interact.
Well, and I haven't really talked about Nijika. Like Nijika, I do like. I mean, she kind of serves her role just as being that like motivating force for Bocchi. And honestly, like I think her and Bocchi have two of the best like one-on-one interactions in the entire first season. Um, it's like both times it's just them like standing out on the road, but it's like really good moments, you know, that do a lot to just further their, you know, your understanding of their motivations and their goals, and you know, just them being genuine and just very wholesome the whole time, you know, and just like her recognizing Bocchi and like Bocchi recognizing her back, and like there was the point where she was like, "Oh, you're Bocchi Zoraku."
And like you had mentioned it earlier about how like people aren't assholes for the sake of being assholes. And don't get me wrong, I'm very much of the belief that that like at our core human beings are bad. And that's why as many assholes exist as there are. But like, yeah, there are also just folks who are at the very least not disruptive, right? And there are folks who are genuinely helpful and pleasant. And you mentioned earlier about how like the show just sort of doesn't need that. And I think it kind of goes back to the point that like the stakes are low, but they're personal.
Yeah.
And they've been so delightfully personalized that we care. We care so goddamn much that we don't need these arbitrary barriers to sort of keep us going along.
Well, and that's, I mean, like that's where this show really hits it out of the park for me. And I guess I feel like I already talked about it at the beginning, but you know, when I was like looking, I watched some videos on this show, like after I first watched it, just like seeing what other people's opinions were. And, you know, like it was fascinating because I could not, in all of the fucking comments that I could find, like I could not find a single person talking about this show's approach to music, because everyone was just like, oh, haha, this is amazing. Like I relate with Bocchi so much. She's so funny. She's so cute. But like no one ever talked about the music. And I feel like that's kind of one of the only reasons this show works as well as it does, because I know I've already talked about Rio's approach to music, but, you know, I have such a personal relationship with music, and I've been making music for like basically 10 years now, if not a little more than 10 years now. And like, that's a long fucking time. And honestly, COVID was when I like figured out that like if this was something I want to like actually be good at, I'm gonna have to like actually start trying, because for probably those first 7 years all I did was just kind of like fuck around and like, you know, just make shit. which isn't bad. Like, that's basically the only way you can start. But it's like the amount of shit that I learned in the last 3 years as opposed to those first 7 years was like vastly different, and as Bocchi in the show, she just like decides she wants to learn how to play the guitar, and she becomes genuinely like passionate about it and just practices for 3 years. And that's why she becomes so good. But like, I feel like the show, like, it approaches music from that perspective that like, if you are truly passionate about something and if you like truly care about something, you can get very good at it. And like, that's kind of the whole point of Bocchi's character. And it's like, despite all of her flaws, she still has this dream that she's like trying to achieve, and that's a very real thing, because sometimes it's just incredibly hard to like further any desires or dreams that you might have in life. Yeah.
I kind of don't want to say anything else because I feel like you've put a very nice like button on part of the reason that makes this show good. It's interesting that you bring up that you haven't really seen takes on the take towards music. Well, because I'm a level with you. I didn't think about it either, right? Like, this is very much a show where if you're not thinking about that and like thinking about that element, if you take the whole band part as just like set dressing or setting, you still have a very engaging story of Bocchi and social anxiety. But then, to the show's credit, there's this whole entire deeper level to it that I think you've done a fantastic job of outlining why it's there, or saying that it's there and then showing where it is, right? Like,
yeah,
you've done a very fantastic job of that.
And it's hard to not try, or like to try and not come across as a like, oh, if you're not a musician, you won't fucking get this show. But like, I think you can still be a musician. I truly, and like, I don't know. It's hard to put.
Right. The show stands alone without it, right? Like,
yeah.
If it's not something that you're engaging with, if it's not something that you're like digging into, what's left of the show is still very substantial. It's still very good. And I think it is written with non-musicians in mind, right? Like, I
Exactly.
don't like there is no barrier of entry here, right?
And yeah, I am like in a particular case, and it's like, I've just never seen any piece of media really approach art from that perspective. And, not everyone has as personal of a relationship with art, but I pretty much spend most of my time thinking about art and how I want to make better art, despite not being paid for it, or not having a living doing it, and I've conflicted over the years constantly, because it's like, deep down, I want to be able to make money doing music. I would love to be able to support myself doing music, but it's like, that's not always a possibility. And like, sometimes making the thing that you love doing the most your living can kind of ultimately ruin that thing.
Yeah.
And like, this show kind of grapples with that in a way, like Rio being a high schooler, like obviously she hasn't hit that point, but like, she is still a representation of a character that, loves music and will leave a group of musicians because they just want to do music for the financial side of things. They want to become popular, and like, there is a trade that you have to make there. Sometimes you can't just follow your heart doing music and making whatever the fuck you want, because honestly, that's less marketable, Yeah.
And like, that's like why you see with a lot of the well-established musicians in the past, they like, once their heyday is over, for lack of a better word, heyday is over, and they have made their money, that's why like the 7th, 8th, 9th album later start getting fucking weird with it, because that's what they wanted to do, right? And it's interesting. It's good. I would also add it to the list, by the way.
Sorry, I just threw that.
Oh no, I love this energy. I would do every episode like this.
I just wish I was this passionate about anything else except music. Like that. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like, it just, it came out of nowhere for me. I was just like, hot damn. And like some of those scenes where, or the two scenes where Nijika and Bocchi like have a conversation genuinely like made me almost tear up. It's like they're being so genuine about it. It's just something you don't get to experience very often. Because I mean, say what you will about having a dream or wanting to achieve your dream someday. Like, I know that's not possible for everyone, but like it's still, I think, done the best that I've ever seen it in this show.
Well, with that in mind, Forrest, you'd mentioned that you make music.
Yes, and I'm very passionate about it, if that wasn't clear yet.
Where do you put the music that you have made?
Pretty much all of it goes on YouTube. You can find my page at Bustello, which is Bustello. If you search that shit on like YouTube,
search that shit.
But if you do, it'll probably be like, oh, you're looking for Bustello with one L. Well, there's a little button that says Bustello with two L's, and if you click that, you'll find my page immediately.
I don't know. You're the one who handles all the uploading, so I don't know if you don't link yourself in the description. But if you don't, why? Why not just put a link
in
to
the description
your YouTube.
of this?
Yeah.
Oh, I do all the time.
Oh,
I mean, I guess I just
description.
never say that. Yeah, it's always going to be in the description. But
I love that for you. Yeah. No.
I'm glad that I could rant about this show.
I am too. I'm glad that you had something.
I hope that I have brought the gospel of Bocchi The Rock to people that aren't musicians.
It's a good show.
Because truly, if you want to be an artist, you just like, this show represents it so well.
I have a musical background as well, but like the way that like everybody who does music in school does. But I've always been a little bit too, but rent's real to ever really let myself feel passionately about creating.
Well,
so it didn't speak to me on those elements. And even I think the show is very good and very emotionally satisfying.
Yeah. Music is like basically one of the only things I do outside of work. So, yeah.
Fair. And then you hang out with me. Okay, anyway, goodbye.
Bye.